The forest floor looks inert from above, a patchwork of fallen leaves, decomposing wood, and dark soil stitched together by fungal threads. But the camera drops lower, slipping beneath a rotting log where light thins and moisture thickens, and the illusion collapses. This is not dead space. It is compressed life, stacked in layers where heat lingers, oxygen is scarce, and movement happens fast and without warning. Hands go here first. Humans lift logs to clear paths, to sit, to look beneath out of curiosity or habit. The gesture feels harmless. The danger is not. Beneath the log, coiled against damp bark and shadow, a scolopendrid centipede waits, Scolopendra gigantea. It does not chase. It does not warn. Its body is flattened and segmented, legs splayed laterally for traction, antennae constantly sampling chemical and vibrational cues in the dark. This is an ambush predator designed for confined spaces. The log is not shelter, it is a ceiling. When that ceiling is lifted, the centipede's world collapses upward, and the response is immediate and violent. The first sensation is not pain but pressure, a sudden clamp as the centipede's forcipules, modified front legs ending in venomous claws, hook into flesh. Unlike insects that sting or bite once, Scolopendras strike with both sides of the head simultaneously, anchoring themselves before injecting venom. In the chaos of a startled encounter, the centipede thrashes, its long body whipping in tight arcs, each segment capable of contributing additional punctures as it struggles to escape. What begins as one strike can become several, not because the animal is attacking repeatedly, but because it is trying to disengage in a space that suddenly no longer exists. The venom delivers a deep, spreading burn that feels different from surface stings or needle-like punctures. This is tissue-level pain, heat and pressure radiating outward as venom diffuses through muscle and connective tissue. Swelling follows quickly, driven by a cascade of inflammatory responses that the jungle environment amplifies rather than soothes. Capillaries dilate. Fluid leaks into surrounding tissue. The affected area stiffens and throbs, not rhythmically, but continuously, as if the body cannot decide where to localize the injury. Centipede venom is a complex cocktail, not optimized for killing large animals, but for rapidly immobilizing small, fast prey. It contains enzymes that disrupt cell membranes, neurotoxins that interfere with ion channels, and compounds that trigger intense inflammation. In prey like insects or small vertebrates, this combination shuts down movement almost instantly. In humans, it creates a prolonged sensory assault that overwhelms the local area and radiates outward, confusing the nervous system's attempt to contain the damage. The underlog ambush is not incidental. Scolopendras are evolutionarily committed to darkness, moisture, and narrow spaces. Their bodies lose water easily, and they rely on humid microhabitats to prevent desiccation. Logs, rocks, and leaf piles provide stable temperature, high humidity, and predictable prey traffic. Frogs, lizards, insects, and even small mammals pass through these spaces regularly, and the centipede's sensory world is tuned to detect them through vibration rather than sight. When a human hand enters this space, it is interpreted not as an object, but as a large, warm, moving organism, potentially a predator. The thrashing that follows a bite is not aggression in the human sense. It is a mechanical response to sudden exposure. In the centipede's normal hunting context, prey is smaller and restrained quickly. Against a large, unyielding surface like a hand, the animal's escape reflex dominates. Each movement increases the chance of additional punctures, spreading venom mechanically rather than chemically. This is why centipede bites are often described as feeling worse over time, even after the animal has been removed. The injury is not singular. It is layered. The jungle's humidity transforms this injury from acute to enduring. Moist air prevents rapid evaporation of sweat, keeping skin warm and pliable, ideal conditions for inflammation to persist. Heat increases blood flow, accelerating the immune response, but also prolonging swelling and pain. In drier environments, inflammation often peaks and recedes as fluid redistributes and tissue cools. Here, the process stalls. The body remains in a state of response, unable to fully resolve the injury. This environmental feedback loop matters ecologically. Predators that encounter Scolopendras learn quickly, not just from the bite itself, but from the extended aftermath. A lizard that survives an encounter does not simply avoid centipedes, it avoids the microhabitats where they live. This shapes movement patterns across the forest floor, redistributing pressure on insect populations and influencing where decomposition accelerates or slows. The centipede's defense is not just personal protection. It is a force that reorganizes space. Scolopendras themselves are opportunistic and remarkably capable predators. Large individuals have been documented preying on bats in caves, climbing walls to snatch them mid-roost. They are not specialists in venom delivery elegance, they are generalists in mechanical dominance. Their long legs allow rapid bursts of speed. Their flexible bodies let them navigate three-dimensional terrain with ease. Venom is simply one component of a broader toolkit that includes strength, persistence, and a tolerance for environments that many predators avoid. Yet for all their effectiveness, centipedes are vulnerable. They cannot afford prolonged exposure to open air. Their exoskeleton offers little protection against crushing force. The underlog ambush is as much about defense as it is about hunting. When that refuge is violated, the response must be decisive enough to create immediate disengagement. Pain, swelling, and confusion serve this purpose perfectly. For humans, the mistake often lies in expectation. Logs feel inert. The forest floor feels passive. But in tropical ecosystems, stillness is often the most active strategy available. Scolopendras do not patrol or advertise. They wait. And when contact happens, it is already too late to negotiate space or intent. The injury unfolds in phases. The initial clamp, the spreading burn, the swelling that tightens skin and limits movement. Each one reinforced by heat and humidity that refuse to let the body reset. Hours later, the log sits where it was replaced, the centipede once again hidden beneath it, coiled and intact. The forest shows no sign of disturbance, but the lesson has been delivered. Under logs, hands go first, and in the jungle, that order matters. The Scolopendra does not need to kill, chase, or pursue. It only needs to ensure that the space beneath its ceiling is remembered as hostile long after the pain should have faded. The frog does not move when the camera finds it. It sits exposed on a broad green leaf, daylight washing over its skin without the slightest attempt to hide. In a forest where survival usually depends on shadow and retreat, this is a violation of the rules. Bright color replaces camouflage. Stillness replaces flight. Poison dart frog, do not wait for an attack because they do not need to. Their danger does not arrive through teeth or claws. It transfers. There is no bite, no sting, no puncture. The threat is already on the surface. The skin of a poisoned dart frog is not a barrier, it is an interface. Glands embedded throughout its epidermis exude alkaloid toxins, continuously replenished, continuously present. These compounds do not need force to enter another body. They wait for moisture, friction, or vulnerability, the soft tissues where biology is exposed. Eyes, mouth, cuts. The danger is passive but relentless. Nothing has to happen except contact. This is the twist that makes poison dart frogs so effective and so misunderstood. People expect venom to be delivered actively, to arrive as a consequence of aggression. Here, aggression is irrelevant. The frog does not chase, bite, or strike. It does not need to. The toxin sits patiently on its skin, ready to move the moment another organism supplies the mechanism. Touch becomes the delivery system. The victim completes the transaction themselves. In the forest, this strategy is devastatingly efficient. Predators learn quickly that tasting these frogs is a mistake, but the learning process is unforgiving. A bird that snaps at a frog may not even swallow it before toxins spread across the lining of the mouth and tongue, triggering immediate distress. Numbness, paralysis, disorientation. Some predators survive and remember. Others do not. The frog does not adjust its behavior either way. Its defense is always on. The camera moves closer, close enough to see the fine texture of the frog's skin, smooth, almost polished, beaded with moisture from the humid air. That moisture is part of the system. Alkaloids dissolve easily in water and oils, allowing them to smear, to transfer, to hitch a ride. When human skin brushes a frog, toxins adhere instantly, invisible and unremarkable. There is no immediate pain to signal danger. The mistake feels incomplete, and that is what makes it dangerous. The real exposure often happens seconds or minutes later. A hand wipes sweat from the brow. Fingers rub tired eyes. A scratch finds a mosquito bite or a small cut from a thorn. The toxins move with intention now, not their own, but ours. They are carried to mucous membranes and broken skin, where the body is least defended. This is the spread that defines poison dart frog encounters. Not diffusion through tissue, but redistribution through behavior. You smear the danger onto yourself. Once across a vulnerable surface, the toxins act fast. Alkaloids like batrachotoxin interfere with sodium channels in nerve and muscle cells, locking them open. Signals fire uncontrollably. Muscles contract and cannot relax. Nerves lose their ability to transmit meaningful information. In small doses, this may cause numbness, tingling, or weakness. In larger exposures, the effects escalate rapidly: paralysis, respiratory failure, cardiac disruption. The skin contact was brief. The consequences are systemic. From the frog's perspective, this system is not just defensive, it is economical. Poison dart frogs do not synthesize these toxins themselves. They acquire them through diet, accumulating alkaloids from ants, mites, and other small arthropods they consume. The forest supplies the chemistry. The frog stores it, concentrates it, and displays it. Bright coloration advertises toxicity, reducing the number of encounters that ever progress to contact. This warning system, known as aposematism, only works because the toxin transfer is reliable. Predators that test the signal are punished immediately. But aposematism is only part of the story. Poison dart frogs are small, slow, and diurnal. They move openly through leaf litter and understory during the day, when visual predators are most active. Without toxins, this would be suicidal. With them, it becomes an advantage. Daylight allows these frogs to forage efficiently, defend territories, and engage in complex social behaviors like parental care, all while remaining conspicuous. Their toxicity buys them time and space. Humidity again plays a crucial role. In the damp rainforest, skin is rarely dry. Sweat, rain, and condensation keep toxins mobile. This increases the risk of transfer, but also enhances the frog's defensive reach. A predator does not need to bite down hard or break skin. A brief mouth contact can be enough. The forest amplifies the toxin's effectiveness by keeping the delivery medium, moisture, constantly available. Humans entering this system often misunderstand the risk because it does not match familiar injury patterns. There is no wound to clean, no stinger to remove, no bite mark to monitor. The danger feels abstract until symptoms begin, and by then, the exposure may already be complete. This delay creates a false sense of safety that encourages further contamination. People touch their faces, adjust clothing, handle equipment. Each action spreads trace amounts of toxin across new surfaces. In indigenous contexts, this property was understood and harnessed. Certain cultures deliberately collected frog toxins to coat blow darts, creating weapons that required no force beyond a shallow puncture to be lethal. The frogs themselves were handled carefully, often without injury, their toxins harvested through controlled methods that minimized risk. This knowledge underscores a critical point. Poison dart frogs are not indiscriminately dangerous. They are precise. The danger lies not in proximity, but in transfer. Ecologically, this precision shapes entire communities. Predators avoid areas dense with toxic frogs, altering hunting routes and prey selection. Insects that serve as toxin sources experience selective pressure, influencing their own chemical defenses. The frogs become nodes in a chemical network that links plants, insects, predators, and even microbes. Their toxicity is not an isolated trait, it is a convergence point for multiple evolutionary pathways. The frogs themselves are sensitive to disruption. Captive-bred individuals often lose their toxicity entirely because their diet lacks the necessary alkaloids. Their bright colors remain, but the warning becomes a lie. In the wild, this mismatch would be catastrophic. It highlights how tightly coupled these frogs are to their environment. Remove the forest's chemical complexity, and the frog's primary defense evaporates. As the chapter deepens, the camera tracks a frog moving deliberately across the forest floor, unfazed by exposure. Ants scatter around it. A small lizard pauses, then detours. The frog is not dominant through aggression, but through trust in its chemistry. It does not need to flee because it does not need to fear. The human lesson here is uncomfortable. We are conditioned to respect danger that acts upon us, not danger we carry forward ourselves. Poison dart frogs invert that expectation. The toxin does not hunt you. You spread it. Every reflexive gesture becomes a potential amplifier. The threat grows not because the frog escalates, but because you do. By the time symptoms appear, tingling lips, blurred vision, muscle weakness, the original contact is a memory, often dismissed as trivial. The frog is long gone. The forest is unchanged. Yet the body is now engaged in a chemical negotiation it did not consent to and does not control. This is the quiet power of poison dart frogs. No bite, no sting, no violence in the moment of contact. Just a surface loaded with consequence, waiting for biology and habit to do the rest. The spread is not something that happens to you. It is something you do to yourself, guided by instincts that evolved in a world where skin was usually safe to trust. The forest doesn't announce the danger. There is no warning color flaring in motion, no sound, no visible aggression. The camera glides along a broad Amazonian leaf slick with last night's rain, its surface filmed with algae and pollen, chewed margins marking where insects fed hours ago. A hand reaches in only briefly, not grabbing, not careless, just steadying against the understory as people do instinctively in dense vegetation. The contact is almost nothing. A soft brush, lighter than a mosquito landing. For a fraction of a second, there is no signal at all. Then the sensation arrives, not as pain, but as heat. A pinprick warmth that feels misplaced, like static electricity trapped under the skin. Within seconds, it spreads outward in branching lines, deepening from warmth into burning, then into something sharper and harder to localize, as if the skin itself has forgotten where its boundaries are. Venomous caterpillars don't bite. They don't sting in the way people understand stings. They outsource the delivery. Along their bodies are thousands of hollow, brittle spines, setae, evolved not to pierce once and withdraw, but to break. Each spine is a disposable hypodermic needle, preloaded with venom and designed to shear off under pressure. When skin brushes the caterpillar or the leaf it rests on, those spines snap free and embed themselves invisibly into the outer layers of flesh. There is no single wound to point to, no obvious puncture. The injury is distributed, microscopic, multiplied hundreds of times across a contact area no larger than a coin. What feels like a growing burn is actually chemistry spreading through tissue, a cascade of inflammatory signals triggered by venom that the body doesn't recognize as a single insult, but as many. The caterpillar itself remains motionless, camouflaged perfectly against bark or leaf litter, its spines catching the light like dust rather than weapons. This stillness is not passivity. It is part of the trap. Predators that rely on motion cues overlook it. Humans tuned to notice teeth, fangs, and obvious threat postures do the same. The defense only activates when contact is made, when the predator or accidental toucher commits fully. From the caterpillar's perspective, this is ideal. Venom production is metabolically expensive, but this delivery system wastes nothing. Only the spines that make contact are used, and each spine does its job independently. There is no need for precision, no need for aim. Evolution has favored redundancy over accuracy. As the burning sensation intensifies, the instinctive response is to rub. Fingers press against the skin, trying to localize the pain, to smooth it away. Sweat beads form as the nervous system shifts into alert mode, heart rate ticking upward. Clothing brushes the area as the person moves, fabric catching and dragging across the skin. Each of these actions makes the situation worse. Rubbing doesn't remove the spines, it fractures them. Broken spines release more venom and migrate laterally through sweat and friction, reseeding adjacent skin with microscopic fragments. What began as a brief brush on a leaf now expands, the affected area growing not because the venom is spreading on its own, but because the body is unknowingly distributing it. This is where venomous caterpillars diverge sharply from the more familiar venom systems of snakes or scorpions. There is no single injection event, no defined dose delivered all at once. The venom is metered through behavior after the contact. Movement, heat, and moisture become amplifiers. In tropical environments, where humidity is high and sweat forms quickly, this amplification is almost guaranteed. The venom itself often contains compounds that disrupt blood clotting, damage capillaries, or overstimulate pain receptors. In some species, the effect goes beyond localized injury, interfering with systemic processes like coagulation. But even when the venom is not life-threatening, it is persistently instructive. It teaches predators and humans through duration rather than intensity. In the forest, this persistence matters. A bird that brushes a venomous caterpillar while foraging doesn't experience a sharp, immediate shock that triggers instant avoidance. Instead, it experiences discomfort that worsens as it preens, as it moves, as it tries to resolve the irritation. The memory that forms is not of a dramatic strike, but of an object that causes lingering harm when handled. Over time, predators learn to associate certain textures, silhouettes, or microhabitats with delayed punishment. The caterpillar doesn't need to kill or even seriously injure. It only needs to be remembered as not worth the effort. This is a defensive strategy tuned to learning, not lethality. The environment reinforces this lesson. Venomous caterpillars often position themselves in places of frequent contact. The undersides of leaves at chest height, the edges of trunks used as handholds, the low vegetation along narrow trails. They are not chasing encounters, but they are exploiting predictability in movement patterns. Large mammals and humans alike use the same routes, the same supports, the same visual shortcuts when navigating dense growth. The caterpillar's stillness and camouflage exploit the limits of attention. You cannot scan every surface with equal scrutiny, and evolution has shaped animals, including humans, to prioritize certain cues over others. Venomous caterpillars live in the gaps created by that prioritization. As the pain continues to spread, another layer of the system becomes visible: time. The venom does not peak immediately. In some cases, it escalates over hours, with inflammation deepening and secondary symptoms emerging as the immune system responds. The delayed nature of the injury complicates diagnosis and response. People often underestimate the cause, assuming contact dermatitis or a minor irritant, continuing normal activity and unknowingly exacerbating the exposure. In the forest, this delay can be dangerous not because the caterpillar itself is deadly, but because impaired hands, swelling or distraction increase the risk of secondary accidents. A compromised grip near water, a misstep on uneven ground, a delayed reaction when encountering other hazards. The caterpillar's defense ripples outward into the broader risk landscape. From an ecological perspective, this is elegant. The caterpillar is a soft-bodied, slow-moving organism in an environment full of fast, sharp, hungry things. It cannot flee. It cannot fight. Instead, it turns the predator's own biology against it, hijacking pain pathways and behavioral instincts. The venom doesn't need to overwhelm physiology. It needs to interfere with decision-making long enough for avoidance to become habitual. In this way, venomous caterpillars shape predator behavior without ever being seen. They create invisible boundaries in the forest, zones where touch is discouraged and memory does the policing. The camera lingers now on the leaf itself, its surface seemingly empty. Under magnification, tiny translucent spines are visible, scattered like glass fibers left behind after the caterpillar has moved on. The danger remains even in absence. This is another underappreciated aspect of their strategy: residual threat. Spines can persist on foliage, bark, or clothing detached from the animal that produced them. Contact doesn't require a living caterpillar at all. The ecosystem carries the weapon forward, embedding it into the environment itself. For predators and people alike, this breaks the usual rule that danger is attached to visible organisms. Here, the hazard is environmental, diffuse, and temporally disconnected from its source. In evolutionary terms, this system is costly but stable. Producing venom and specialized spines requires resources, but it dramatically reduces predation pressure. Species that rely on this strategy often invest less in speed, armor, or aggressive behavior, reallocating energy toward growth and reproduction instead. Many are nocturnal feeders, moving under cover of darkness when visual predators are least effective, then remaining still during the day when contact risk is highest. Their entire life history is organized around minimizing detection and maximizing the deterrent value of accidental contact. By the time the burning sensation begins to fade, hours later, the lesson has been learned. Not through spectacle, but through persistence. The forest has demonstrated that danger does not always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper of contact that grows louder the more you try to ignore it. Venomous caterpillars embody a rule that governs much of tropical ecology. The most effective defenses are not the ones that strike hardest, but the ones that continue working long after the encounter is over. ChatGPT can make mistakes. The insect is almost invisible at first, not because it is perfectly camouflaged, but because it registers as insignificant. The camera drifts across a sunlit patch of leaf litter where ants thread predictable routes and beetles navigate the debris with mechanical certainty. Perched on the underside of a leaf stem is a shape that looks unfinished, angular and still, legs folded in a way that suggests rest rather than readiness. Assassin bugs are small enough to be dismissed by scale alone. In a forest where danger usually announces itself with size, color, or sound, this one survives by being overlooked. That dismissal is the opening it needs. An assassin bug, does not rely on speed or numbers. It relies on precision. Its most defining feature is the proboscis, a rigid, needle-like beak folded beneath the head when not in use. This is not a mouth in the chewing sense. It is a syringe. When the bug feeds, the proboscis locks forward, driven by powerful muscles, and pierces directly into prey tissue. Enzymes are injected first, liquefying internal structures. Only then does feeding begin, the bug drinking what it has chemically pre-digested. It is an efficient system, optimized for immobilizing prey larger and stronger than itself. When that same system is turned on human skin, the surprise is immediate and disorienting. The pain does not arrive explosively like a wasp sting, nor does it feel diffuse like a rash. It is sharply localized, as if a hot pin has been pressed deliberately into a single point and held there. The intensity is disproportionate to the insect's size, and that mismatch is what causes most people to react incorrectly. The brain searches for a cause that matches the sensation, something large, aggressive, obvious, and finds nothing. By the time the assassin bug is noticed, it has already disengaged, leaving behind a wound that looks trivial but behaves anything but. The chemistry explains why. Assassin bug saliva is engineered to break down living tissue. It contains proteolytic enzymes that dissolve cell membranes, anticoagulants that prevent clotting, and neuroactive compounds that disrupt local nerve signaling. In prey insects, this cocktail shuts down movement and begins digestion simultaneously. In humans, it creates a pocket of chemical chaos beneath the skin. Nerve endings fire erratically. Blood vessels dilate and leak fluid. The immune system responds aggressively, flooding the area with inflammatory cells that amplify swelling and heat. What should be a pinpoint injury expands into a firm, painful knot that continues to worsen long after the initial puncture. This lingering quality is key. Assassin bugs are ambush predators. They wait motionless, often for hours, until prey wanders within reach. Their success depends on a single, well-placed strike. The venom is not designed for speed alone, but for certainty. Once injected, the outcome is locked in. The prey does not escape because it cannot. That same certainty plays out in human skin as persistence. The pain does not fade quickly. The swelling does not resolve overnight. The injury demands attention, and in doing so, it tempts interference. This is where the mistake loop begins. The bite itches as it heals, not because histamine is the only player, but because damaged tissue sends mixed signals to the nervous system. Scratching feels briefly relieving, then sharply aggravating. Fingernails abrade already compromised skin, widening the injury and reactivating inflammation. In tropical environments, where sweat is constant and bacterial load is high, this abrasion becomes an invitation. Dirt, plant matter, and microbes enter the wound easily. What began as a clean puncture turns into a contaminated lesion, red and swollen, sometimes developing secondary infection that dramatically extends recovery time. From the assassin bug's perspective, this is irrelevant. The goal was never to kill a human or even to cause lasting harm. The goal was to discourage handling, to ensure that any large animal that brushes or grasps too closely learns to associate that shape and texture with pain. Like many arthropod defenses, the effect scales through behavior rather than lethality. A predator that experiences this kind of localized, persistent pain does not need to die to be controlled. It only needs to hesitate next time. In the forest, this strategy works across multiple levels of the food web. Small lizards that attempt to eat assassin bugs often drop them after the first bite, shaking their heads violently as pain radiates through the mouth tissues. Birds learn quickly to avoid their angular silhouettes. Even spiders, formidable predators in their own right, sometimes abandon attacks after being pierced by a proboscis they underestimated. The assassin bug survives not by overpowering threats, but by making itself too costly to engage. This cost-benefit manipulation extends into the bug's broader ecological role. Assassin bugs are important regulators of insect populations, particularly herbivorous species that can damage plants when unchecked. Their ambush strategy allows them to remove prey selectively, often targeting weakened or careless individuals. This predation pressure shapes insect behavior, pushing feeding activity into safer times or locations and reducing overexploitation of vegetation. In this way, the assassin bug's venom indirectly influences plant health and forest structure. Their own vulnerability makes this precision necessary. Assassin bugs are not armored. They cannot withstand crushing force. They are exposed to birds, mammals, and larger insects that could easily destroy them if given the chance. The proboscis injection is both weapon and shield. a way to punch above their weight in a world that otherwise offers little margin for error. Human encounters often occur at the edge of this system. A hand brushes foliage. A forearm rests against bark. A sleeping person shifts against a wall where insects shelter. The assassin bug does not seek these interactions, but it does not retreat from them either. When compressed or threatened, it uses the only defense it has, delivering a strike that is fast, precise, and chemically decisive. The aftermath can feel disproportionate, especially when viewed through the lens of size alone. Swelling can persist for days. The skin may harden and discolor. In rare cases, allergic responses amplify the reaction further, spreading redness well beyond the bite site. Yet medically, these injuries are rarely dangerous on their own. The real risk lies in secondary damage, infection, delayed healing, and poor wound care driven by the itch pain cycle. This pattern reveals a recurring theme in tropical injury ecology. Small does not mean mild. Many of the most disruptive encounters come from organisms that exploit human assumptions about scale and threat. Assassin bugs fit perfectly into this category. They are not dramatic. They do not swarm or chase. They simply wait, armed with chemistry refined over millions of years to turn a single mistake into a lasting lesson. As the camera pulls back, the forest resumes its quiet motion. Ants continue their lines. Leaves sway gently as heat rises off the ground. Somewhere on a stem, an assassin bug settles back into stillness, proboscis folded, body aligned with shadow. Nothing about it looks dangerous, and that is precisely the point. The trail looks ordinary at first, a narrow ribbon of compacted soil pressed into the forest floor by generations of feet, human and animal alike. Light filters through the canopy in fractured beams, catching suspended dust and pollen, illuminating the slow drift of humidity rising from the ground. The camera moves low, tracking the base of buttress roots and fallen branches where life is densest and scale is deceptive. Nothing appears aggressive. Nothing moves quickly. Yet beneath the surface of this calm, a defensive system is already primed, calibrated not to warn, but to punish decisively when crossed. Bullet ants, Paraponera clavata, do not rely on numbers alone, despite their formidable colonies. They rely on pain, not as a byproduct of defense, but as the primary weapon. When a sting lands, it does not feel sharp in the way a wasp sting does, nor fleeting like a nettle's burn. It arrives with weight. The sensation is often described as hot metal driven into flesh, but that metaphor undersells what actually happens physiologically. The venom does not merely irritate tissue, it hijacks the nervous system itself, forcing pain signals to fire continuously and without modulation. The result is not a spike, but a sustained overload, as if the body's volume knob for pain has been twisted hard in one direction and broken off. In the forest, this matters more than severity alone. Pain that peaks quickly can be endured, compartmentalized, worked through. Pain that persists, that refuses to settle, destabilizes behavior. Bullet ant venom contains a peptide known as ponerotoxin, which interferes with sodium channels in nerve cells. Instead of allowing neurons to reset after firing, it keeps them locked in an active state, sending repeated signals to the brain long after the physical stimulus has ended. The sting site becomes irrelevant. The entire limb enters a state of neurological alarm. Muscles tremble, coordination degrades, and the brain's ability to prioritize tasks collapses under the noise. The ant itself is not large by human standards, but it is massive in ant terms, with powerful mandibles and a stinger that is long, smooth, and precisely controlled. It does not sting reflexively. It assesses. Bullet ants are solitary foragers, moving deliberately across the forest floor and lower vegetation, navigating by chemical cues and spatial memory rather than frantic exploration. When threatened, they do not swarm immediately. They posture, vibrate their bodies, and release alarm pheromones that travel through the air and along the ground. This escalation ladder is intentional. The colony does not want to sting unnecessarily. Venom is costly to produce. Pain is reserved for moments when deterrence must be absolute. When that threshold is crossed, the response is decisive. The ant anchors itself with its mandibles and delivers a sting that penetrates deeply, injecting venom directly into muscle and connective tissue. There is no barbed apparatus to tear free. The stinger slides in and out cleanly, allowing the ant to strike multiple times if necessary. The venom disperses rapidly, not spreading through the bloodstream in a toxic sense, but radiating through neural pathways. Within moments, pain begins to climb the limb, following nerves rather than veins, creating the uncanny sensation that the injury is expanding even though the physical damage remains localized. This is the spread that makes bullet ant encounters so destabilizing. The pain does not stay put. It migrates upward, elbow to shoulder, ankle to knee, as the nervous system amplifies and relays the signal. People often describe losing fine motor control, fingers curling involuntarily, legs buckling without warning. This is not weakness, it is interference. The venom floods the system with input, overwhelming the brain's ability to coordinate movement. In the forest, where balance, grip, and spatial awareness are non-negotiable for safety, this loss of control is far more dangerous than the sting itself. Multiple stings compound the effect exponentially. Each additional injection adds another node of uncontrolled neural firing, stacking signals until the body enters a state of whole-system stress. Heart rate increases. Breathing becomes shallow and irregular. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream, further degrading decision-making and motor precision. People in this state make mistakes, not because they panic in the emotional sense, but because their nervous system is operating under duress. Steps are misjudged. Hands release holds prematurely. Attention narrows to the pain, excluding environmental awareness. The ant does not need to chase or pursue. The damage is already done. From an ecological perspective, this pain weapon is exquisitely tuned. Bullet ants are not fast enough to escape many predators, nor numerous enough to overwhelm them individually. Instead, they aim to teach a lesson that generalizes. A mammal that receives a bullet ant sting does not merely learn to avoid that ant, it learns to avoid the context in which the sting occurred. The tree base, the trail edge, the scent profile of the colony's territory. This is pain as education. The memory formed is vivid, durable, and transferable. Predators do not need to be killed to be controlled, they only need to be trained. This strategy also explains why bullet ant colonies are often stable for decades, occupying the same trees and trail-adjacent zones year after year. Their defense creates a behavioral exclusion zone around the nest. Animals learn to root around it. Humans do the same, sometimes unconsciously, altering paths after a single encounter. The ants do not dominate through aggression, but through deterrence that scales beyond the individual. The forest amplifies this effect. Heat increases venom diffusion. Sweat lowers skin resistance, making stings more effective. Humidity keeps pheromone trails intact longer, allowing ants to coordinate responses across wider areas. Even the structure of vegetation matters. Narrow trails funnel movement, increasing the likelihood of accidental intrusion into defended zones. Bullet ants exploit these environmental constants without needing to modify their own behavior. Their success is embedded in the physics and physiology of the ecosystem. There is a deeper irony here. Bullet ants are often cited in human narratives for their role in initiation rituals, where individuals voluntarily endure multiple stings as a test of endurance. What is rarely emphasized is how precisely this ritual mirrors the ant's evolutionary intent. The ants are not delivering a challenge, they are enforcing a boundary. The pain is not symbolic. It is functional, calibrated to incapacitate temporarily without causing lasting tissue damage, ensuring the message is delivered clearly and remembered vividly. That humans reinterpret this experience as a trial of strength does not diminish the biological truth. The ant's weapon works exactly as designed. As the pain finally begins to recede, hours later, the body remains altered. Muscles ache from sustained tension. Fatigue sets in as stress hormones taper off. The sting site may show little external damage, a faint mark that belies the intensity of the experience. This mismatch between visible injury and felt trauma is part of what makes bullet ant stings so psychologically disruptive. The environment looks unchanged. The ant is gone. Yet the nervous system has been forced through an extreme state, one that lingers in memory long after tissue has recovered. In the larger logic of the rainforest, bullet ants embody a rule that governs many successful species. Survival does not require constant aggression, only the capacity to make a single interaction unforgettable. Their pain weapon does not spread venom through blood or rot flesh over time. It spreads confusion, loss of control, and respect. The forest is full of creatures that kill quietly or hide expertly. Bullet ants choose neither. They announce their presence only after contact, and when they do, the announcement is written directly into the nervous system of whatever made the mistake. The river feels finished with you once you reach the bank. Mud grips your feet. Water drains from your clothes. Breath comes back in ragged pulls, chest heaving, lungs burning with effort rather than water. Whatever just happened is already behind you. That is the lie the Amazon tells best. Survival feels like an ending. In reality, it is only the point where the ecosystem shifts from immediate force to delayed consequence. Somewhere in the channel behind you, a caiman settles back into stillness. The caiman is not built for dramatic chases. It is built for leverage. Short legs, armored hide, a skull shaped like a wedge, and jaws powered by muscles evolved to crush bone rather than slice flesh. When a caiman bites, it does not tear you apart. It clamps. It compresses. The damage it inflicts is not always obvious at first glance, and that is precisely why it is so dangerous. Crush trauma is deceptive. Teeth puncture the skin, yes, but the greater injury happens beneath the surface. Muscles are compacted against bone. Blood vessels rupture internally. Tissue is starved of oxygen, not by loss, but by pressure. When the jaws release, whether through escape, intervention, or sheer chance, the skin may remain mostly intact. The person is alive. The encounter is over. And yet, the wound has already been primed to fail. Caimans occupy a particular niche in the Amazon's logic. They are edge predators, rulers of shallows, banks, flooded forests, and quiet side channels. They hunt where visibility is poor and footing is unreliable, relying on ambush rather than pursuit. Their sensory world is tuned to vibration and pressure changes, to the subtle disturbances made by animals that think they are safe because they are standing, not swimming. A step too close to the waterline, a pause to rinse hands, a crossing attempted at dusk. The caiman does not need intent from its prey. It only needs proximity. When contact happens, it is violent but brief. The jaws close with astonishing force, calibrated not to rip, but to immobilize. Even a partial bite, a limb, a shoulder, a torso edge, delivers enough pressure to compromise deep tissue instantly. Bones may fracture, but even when they do not, the surrounding muscle absorbs energy that it cannot dissipate safely. Cells rupture. Capillaries collapse. Blood pools invisibly beneath the skin. This is where human instinct misleads. Once the bite ends, once the caiman releases or is forced off, attention snaps to the surface. Are there holes? Is there bleeding? Can the limb move? If the answers seem acceptable, relief follows quickly. Adrenaline masks pain. Shock narrows focus. The survivor believes they have outrun the worst outcome. The Amazon does not operate on that timeline. Crushed tissue behaves differently than cut tissue. It swells aggressively as damaged cells release inflammatory signals. Fluid floods the area, but unlike a clean cut, there is nowhere for pressure to escape. Muscles are trapped inside tight fascial compartments. As swelling increases, blood flow decreases further, starving already injured tissue. This sets the stage for necrosis, delayed cell death that unfolds over hours or days, not minutes. Now add the river. Amazonian water is not sterile. It is biologically rich to the point of saturation. Bacteria adapted to warm, low-oxygen environments thrive here, including species that exploit damaged tissue with ruthless efficiency. A caiman bite introduces these organisms deep into muscle through punctures and micro-tears created by crushing force. Even if the skin looks intact, microscopic channels have been opened. The river has already entered you. Infections following crocodilian bites are notoriously severe, not because the animals are uniquely dirty, but because their feeding ecology exposes them to decaying matter constantly. Caimans feed on fish, mammals, birds, and carrion. Their mouths host complex microbial communities perfectly suited to breaking down flesh. When those microbes are driven into crushed tissue with limited blood supply, the immune system struggles to respond effectively. Antibiotics, even when available, may have difficulty penetrating areas where circulation is compromised. This is the expansion phase, the part almost no one anticipates. Pain increases instead of decreasing. Swelling tightens skin until it shines. Fever develops as the immune system escalates its response. The wound that once seemed manageable becomes unstable, then threatening. In severe cases, surgical intervention is required to remove dead tissue, relieve pressure, or prevent systemic infection. Survival of the bite becomes irrelevant. The fight has moved inside the body. Ecologically, this delayed punishment makes sense. Caimans do not need to kill every animal they bite. Injury alone reshapes behavior. A deer, capybara, or human that survives an encounter but suffers lasting impairment is removed from effective participation in the ecosystem. It moves differently. It avoids water. It becomes cautious to the point of inefficiency. Predation pressure shifts. Territory boundaries harden. The caiman's influence extends far beyond the moment of contact. This is why crocodilians have remained largely unchanged for millions of years. Their strategy does not depend on precision or speed. It depends on inevitability. Even failed attacks can succeed indirectly by weakening prey long after the jaws have opened. In evolutionary terms, that is efficiency at its most brutal. The human body, evolved for endurance and repair in relatively clean environments, struggles here. Wounds that would be survivable elsewhere become liabilities in the Amazon. Heat accelerates bacterial growth. Humidity slows healing. Limited access to care compounds every problem. The ecosystem does not need to finish you quickly. It is content to let consequences accumulate. As the chapter closes, the camera drifts back to the river's edge at dusk. The water is calm again. Dragonflies skim the surface. A caiman's eyes break the waterline briefly, then vanish. There is no sense of menace now, only continuity. The river does not mark victories. It does not remember survivors. This is the final lesson the Amazon delivers over and over across species and scales. The danger is not always the moment you fear most. Sometimes it waits until you relax. Sometimes it grows after you think you are safe. You survive the bite, and then the wound expands into a problem. The punishment is not immediate. It is patient. And by the time you realize it isn't over, the Amazon has already moved on, leaving you alone with the aftermath. The river looks calm at the edge. Brown water slides past the bank with a steady, unremarkable flow, carrying leaves, foam, and the faint smell of vegetation breaking down upstream. From the surface there is no signal of danger, no dorsal fins, no splashing frenzy, no movement that would trigger instinctive caution. The camera settles just below the waterline, where light thins and visibility collapses into shifting silhouettes. This is where the misunderstanding begins. Piranhas are not waiting to consume you. They are waiting for opportunity. And opportunity in their world begins with an opening. A piranha is built around one defining feature: teeth designed to cut cleanly and decisively. Triangular, razor-sharp, perfectly interlocking, they function less like the teeth of a predator that chews and more like a pair of biological shears. When a bite lands, it does not tear, grind, or worry flesh. It slices. Tissue parts instantly, exposing fresh muscle and blood with surgical efficiency. The fish does not need to hold on. The damage is already done. This is the core truth that popular myth obscures. Piranhas do not eat you in the dramatic sense. They open you. Everything that follows, fear, bleeding, infection risk, cascades from that single mechanical advantage. The encounter often begins with something minor: a hand in the water while handling a net, a foot brushing submerged branches, a small cut already present on the skin from an unrelated scrape. Piranhas are opportunistic omnivores, not relentless hunters of large animals. They respond to sensory cues, vibration, sudden movement, and most importantly, chemical signals carried by water. Blood is not a dinner bell by itself, but it is a high-contrast data point in a river already rich with organic noise. It tells the fish that tissue is exposed somewhere nearby. When a piranha bites defensively or opportunistically, the strike is fast enough to feel unreal. There is no prolonged struggle, no tug of war. The fish darts in, closes its jaws once, and is gone. For a moment, the brain struggles to interpret what just happened. The pain is sharp, but secondary. The real shock comes from sight and sensation. The sudden warmth of blood spreading into the water, the unnatural smoothness of the wound's edges where skin should resist. This clean slice is what makes piranha injuries uniquely dangerous. Jagged wounds tear irregularly and often collapse inward, limiting blood flow. A piranha cut stays open. The edges are neat, refusing to close, bleeding freely. Capillaries and small vessels are exposed simultaneously, creating steady, difficult-to-control bleeding even from relatively small wounds. In warm water, blood disperses quickly, obscuring the extent of injury and making assessment harder in the moment. The fish does not need to return. The damage is self-sustaining. Pain escalates as nerves react to exposure. Muscles around the wound tense reflexively, but this does little to slow bleeding. The body's immediate priority becomes escape, getting out of the water, and this is where the spread truly begins. Panic is not an emotional weakness here. It is a physiological response to rapid blood loss and perceived vulnerability. Heart rate spikes. Breathing becomes shallow and fast. Coordination degrades. Simple tasks like climbing onto a bank or a boat become harder just when they are most necessary. Warm river water compounds the problem. It prevents rapid vasoconstriction, allowing bleeding to continue more freely than it might in cooler environments. It also introduces a biological load that few people consider in the moment. Amazonian rivers are rich in bacteria, adapted to thrive in organic matter. An open wound submerged in this environment is not just bleeding, it is being seeded. Microorganisms enter exposed tissue immediately, and the longer the wound remains underwater, the greater the contamination risk becomes. This is why piranha injuries are not defined by the bite itself, but by what follows. The fish does not need to swarm. It does not need to escalate. The injury creates its own crisis. Blood loss weakens the victim. Panic increases movement, which can reopen clotting vessels and worsen bleeding. Stress impairs judgment, leading to poor wound management. Each factor amplifies the others, turning a single, clean cut into a cascading problem. From the piranha's perspective, this efficiency is evolutionarily sound. Piranhas evolved in rivers where resources fluctuate dramatically with seasons. During dry periods, fish density increases, competition intensifies, and food becomes scarce. In such conditions, the ability to remove chunks of tissue quickly from prey, carcasses, or even larger animals is invaluable. A piranha does not need to overpower a rival. It only needs to injure it badly enough that others finish the job or that the injured animal withdraws. This strategy extends beyond predation into scavenging and cleanup. Piranhas play a critical ecological role by rapidly processing dead and dying organisms, preventing the accumulation of rotting biomass that would otherwise degrade water quality. Their teeth are tools for recycling nutrients efficiently. In this context, their reputation as mindless killers collapses. They are precision processors in a system that rewards speed and decisiveness. The myth of the feeding frenzy persists because it captures a truth out of context. Piranhas do respond collectively to intense stimuli, especially in confined spaces or during extreme scarcity. But these events are not the norm, and even then, the mechanism remains the same. Clean, efficient cuts delivered rapidly, not prolonged consumption of a living victim. The danger to humans lies not in being eaten alive, but in being injured in a way that is difficult to control under environmental pressure. The spread angle becomes clearer with time. Once out of the water, bleeding may continue stubbornly. Swelling develops around the wound as inflammation sets in. Pain deepens as exposed nerves react to air and movement. Hours later, even if bleeding is controlled, the contamination risk remains. Infection can develop quickly in tropical climates, especially when wounds are closed prematurely without thorough cleaning. What felt survivable in the moment can become a medical emergency days later. This delayed escalation reinforces the piranha's role in the larger theme of invisible failure states. The river does not attack you. The fish does not chase you. A small mistake, a cut, a careless movement, a moment of distraction opens a door. The piranha simply makes that opening clean enough that everything else can rush through. The camera returns to the riverbank. The water continues to flow, unbothered. Small fish dart through submerged roots. Somewhere beneath the surface, piranhas resume their slow patrols, alert but not frenzied. The ecosystem has already absorbed the event. Nutrients disperse. Chemical traces fade. The river forgets quickly. The human body does not. A clean slice is deceptively simple. It looks manageable. It feels finite. But in warm water, surrounded by bacteria, with blood flowing freely and fear narrowing attention, that simplicity becomes a trap. Piranhas do not need to kill you to be dangerous. They only need to open you and let the river finish the work. The web is already there before the camera finds the spider. It hangs in the dark geometry beneath a rock ledge, between discarded boards, under the lip of a hollow log, not elegant or symmetrical, but tangled and functional. Black widow webs are not built to be admired. They are built to intercept movement at ground level, to snag legs and wings rather than advertise beauty. The spider itself is absent at first, hidden in a silken retreat just out of sight, where vibration matters more than vision. Nothing jumps. Nothing lunges. This is not an ambush that announces itself with speed. It is a slow system, waiting for time to do the work. The black widow spider, survives by restraint. Unlike many spiders that flee at disturbance, widows hold position. Their venom is too valuable to waste on panic, and their bodies are too delicate to risk unnecessary movement. They rely on a single advantage, chemistry that unfolds gradually, turning a minor injury into a full-body experience that overwhelms through persistence rather than shock. When the bite happens, it is often unnoticed. 2 tiny punctures, sometimes no more painful than a pinprick, delivered when skin presses the spider against a surface it cannot retreat from. Under a glove, inside a shoe, along the edge of a woodpile, beneath a seat. The spider does not chase or strike at distance. It reacts to compression. The fangs penetrate just enough to deliver venom, then withdraw. The spider retreats immediately, its role finished. The real event begins afterward. For minutes, sometimes longer, there is little to feel. The nervous system registers a disturbance, but cannot yet interpret it. This delay is essential to how black widow venom works. The primary toxin, alpha-latrotoxin, does not destroy tissue or numb nerves. It hijacks communication. It forces nerve endings to release neurotransmitters uncontrollably, flooding synapses with signals meant to be precise and temporary. Muscles receive commands they cannot ignore. Blood vessels respond erratically. The body's internal messaging system begins to lose coherence. The first signs are subtle, a tightening near the bite site, a faint ache that feels muscular rather than sharp. Then the sensation expands, not outward across the skin, but inward and upward through connected muscle groups. The calf tightens. The abdomen knots. The back stiffens as if bracing against cold. This is not pain in the traditional sense. It is involuntary contraction, muscles firing when they should be resting, refusing to relax even when consciously commanded to do so. This is why black widow envenomation feels like a takeover rather than an attack. The body is still intact. The skin shows little damage. Yet control is slipping. Cramps intensify, migrating across the torso and limbs, sometimes synchronizing in waves that make breathing shallow and deliberate. Sweat forms not from heat, but from stress, as the autonomic nervous system is pulled into the chaos. Heart rate increases. Blood pressure fluctuates. The body behaves as if it is exerting itself intensely, even while lying still. In ecological terms, this strategy is remarkably efficient. Black widows prey primarily on insects and other arthropods, animals whose survival depends on rapid, coordinated movement. By forcing muscles into sustained contraction, the venom immobilizes prey without the need for physical struggle. The web does the mechanical work of restraint. The venom ensures compliance. For larger animals, including humans, the same mechanism scales into suffering rather than paralysis, not lethal in most cases, but profoundly disruptive. The spider's own behavior reflects this design. Black widows are sedentary by necessity. Their long legs and bulbous abdomens make fast escape risky. Instead, they choose protected microhabitats where compression encounters are rare but decisive when they occur. Their warning coloration, the iconic red marking, is often hidden against surfaces, revealed only at certain angles. This is not a visual threat display meant to deter at a distance. It is a signature meant to be learned after contact, reinforcing memory rather than preventing approach. As the cramps deepen, another feature of the venom becomes apparent. It does not stay local. Because alpha-latrotoxin acts on nerve terminals broadly, its effects propagate through connected neural networks. This is why pain and tightness can spread far from the bite site, affecting muscles that were never physically touched. The suffering grows big while the injury remains small. The mismatch is unsettling. People search for swelling, redness, visible damage that might explain what they are feeling, and find almost nothing. The absence of visual cues makes the experience more psychologically taxing, eroding confidence in the body's ability to self-regulate. In the wild, this psychological effect matters. Predators that experience black widow venom learn to associate certain environments with prolonged incapacitation. A lizard that stumbles into a widow web and survives does not simply avoid spiders. It avoids the crevices, debris piles, and ground-level structures where widows anchor their traps. Over time, this avoidance reshapes movement patterns, redistributing predation pressure and altering which insects thrive near human structures versus deep forest edges. The widow's influence extends far beyond its immediate prey. Humidity and temperature modulate the experience further. In warm environments, circulation increases, accelerating the spread of neurotransmitter disruption. Muscles already working to regulate body temperature become more susceptible to cramping. Dehydration, common in hot climates, worsens symptoms as electrolyte balance becomes harder to maintain under sustained muscular contraction. This is why black widow bites often feel worse at night or during rest, when the body attempts to downshift and finds itself unable to do so. Unlike venom that destroys tissue or causes necrosis, black widow venom leaves no obvious endpoint. There is no dramatic resolution, no visible turning point. Symptoms peak, plateau, and then recede slowly as neurotransmitter stores are depleted and nerve terminals regain control. Relief comes in increments, not relief all at once. Even after the worst cramps subside, residual stiffness and fatigue can linger for days, the nervous system recalibrating itself after forced overuse. From an evolutionary perspective, this restraint is deliberate. A venom that kills large animals would bring little benefit to a spider that cannot consume them. A venom that disables temporarily, teaches avoidance, and preserves the spider's own safety is far more adaptive. Black widows do not want to escalate encounters. They want them to end decisively with minimal physical engagement. This is why most bites occur not in open forest, but at boundaries, the interface between human order and wild persistence. Sheds, woodpiles, garden furniture, boots left unused. These are artificial crevices that mimic natural shelters. The spider does not recognize them as human spaces. It recognizes them as stable, vibration-rich anchor points. When humans intrude into these microhabitats, the interaction is brief, accidental, and chemically profound. As the chapter closes, the camera returns to the web. The spider remains motionless, abdomen heavy with eggs or recent feeding, legs barely shifting as night insects begin to stir. Nothing about this scene looks violent. No attack unfolds, yet the system is complete. A bite that barely registers becomes suffering that dominates attention, movement, and memory. The hook is not fear. It is inevitability. With the Black Widow, the damage does not arrive all at once. It grows quietly until the body realizes too late that it has already been taken over. The water looks shallow enough to trust. Sunlight fractures across ripples, turning the sandy bottom into a shifting mosaic of gold and shadow. From above, nothing moves. No fin breaks the surface. No shape announces itself beneath the waves. This is not an ambush you can see. It is a geometry problem hidden under your feet, solved in a fraction of a second the moment weight comes down where it shouldn't. The stingray, is already there, buried beneath a thin veil of sand. Its body is flattened, disc-shaped, perfectly adapted to disappear into the substrate, with nothing more than a faint outline betraying its presence. Gills pulse gently, drawing oxygen from water filtered through sand grains. Eyes protrude just enough to track movement above, while sensory pores along the body read pressure changes in the water column. The tail lies still, barbed spine tucked close, not poised for attack, but ready for panic. Stingrays do not hunt like sharks. They do not chase or stalk large animals. Their survival depends on remaining unnoticed, conserving energy while waiting for crustaceans, mollusks, or small fish to blunder close enough to trap against the sea floor. Burying is their defense. Remaining invisible is their strategy. The problem begins when something large and vertical, a human leg, enters that same space from above. The step is ordinary. A foot presses down through water into sand. There is a brief sense of softness, then resistance. In that instant, the stingray's world collapses. A massive object has pinned part of its body, cutting off escape routes. The response is not aggression. It is reflex. The tail whips upward and forward in a single violent arc, driving the serrated spine into whatever is pressing down. The puncture is deep and decisive. Stingray spines are not needles. They are flattened, saw-edged blades coated in venomous tissue, capable of tearing as much as piercing. When the spine enters flesh, it does not slide cleanly in and out. The barbs catch. Tissue is ripped open as the tail retracts, widening the wound and dragging foreign material with it. Sand grains, fragments of shell, bits of algae, everything present at the point of impact is shoved deep into muscle. The pain arrives instantly, sharp and explosive, but it does not remain contained. Stingray venom is a complex mixture of proteins that cause intense localized pain, tissue damage, and inflammation. It does not spread through the bloodstream in a classic venomous sense. Instead, it triggers a massive local response that radiates outward as nerves and muscles react. The leg stiffens. Muscles above and below the wound begin to cramp, not because they were injected directly, but because inflammation disrupts normal signaling. Within minutes, swelling sets in. Blood vessels dilate aggressively, leaking fluid into surrounding tissue. Pressure builds inside compartments that are not designed to expand. The pain deepens from sharp to crushing, a sensation often described as the limb being squeezed from the inside. Movement becomes difficult, then impossible. Mobility locks not because bones are damaged, but because muscles cannot coordinate under the combined assault of pain, swelling, and neurological overload. This upward travel of pain is not imaginary. It follows anatomical pathways. Nerves relay distress signals along the leg. Muscles tense reflexively to protect the injury, then fail to release. The knee stiffens. The hip compensates awkwardly. Balance is lost, not from weakness, but from the body's attempt to immobilize itself around the damage. In shallow water, this can be catastrophic. A person who cannot move efficiently risks falling, submerging the wound, or being carried by currents they can no longer counter. The environment makes everything worse. The debris driven into the wound is the silent multiplier. Unlike a clean puncture from a needle or fang, a stingray injury is contaminated from the moment it occurs. Sand grains lodge deep between muscle fibers. Organic material introduces bacteria adapted to marine environments, some of which thrive in low-oxygen tissue. The barbed shape of the spine ensures that flushing the wound is difficult, sometimes impossible, without medical intervention. Even when the spine itself does not break off, microscopic fragments of its serrated edge can remain embedded. This contamination fuels prolonged inflammation. The immune system responds aggressively, sending white blood cells to an area already under pressure. Swelling increases. Pain persists. In some cases, tissue begins to break down around trapped debris, creating pockets where infection can take hold. What began as a single step in sand becomes a complex wound that resists quick resolution. From the stingray's perspective, the encounter is over almost immediately. The animal bolts away, disappearing into deeper water, its defense having done its job. The venom is not meant to kill large animals. It is meant to create enough pain and dysfunction to ensure the ray can escape. Evolution has tuned this response precisely. A ray that hesitated would be crushed. A ray that overcommitted would waste energy or risk injury. The single tail strike is the optimal solution. This defensive design explains why stingray injuries are so often associated with accidental contact rather than deliberate interaction. Rays do not pursue swimmers. They do not strike unless stepped on or trapped. Their venom is not an offensive weapon. It is a panic button. Yet the consequences for the human body are severe because the injury exploits vulnerabilities we rarely consider: soft tissue, upright posture, reliance on leg mobility for survival. Ecologically, stingrays are essential engineers of shallow marine systems. By foraging in sand and mud, they churn sediment, releasing nutrients and reshaping benthic communities. Their movements influence where seagrass grows and how invertebrate populations are distributed. The same burying behavior that makes them ecologically valuable also makes them dangerous to inattentive waders. The conflict is structural, not intentional. There is an irony here that only becomes apparent after the fact. The shallow water that feels safest is often the most dangerous. Visibility is limited by glare and refraction. Waves distort outlines. The sand conceals everything equally. In deeper water, rays are more visible. In ankle to knee-deep shallows, they are effectively invisible. The human instinct to relax in shallow water collides with a predator-prey interface that does not recognize human assumptions. As hours pass, the wound continues to assert itself. Even after initial pain subsides, swelling can persist. Stiffness lingers. Walking remains compromised. The leg feels foreign, unreliable. In severe cases, secondary infection develops days later, long after the memory of the encounter has faded. This delayed escalation reinforces the lessons stingrays impose. The danger is not always in the moment of impact, but in what is carried forward from it. In the broader logic of this chapter's theme, the stingray represents a different kind of spread. The pain does not crawl across the skin or radiate systemically through the bloodstream. It climbs functionally, moving up the leg by shutting down movement one joint at a time. The body responds by locking itself, sacrificing mobility to protect damaged tissue. In an environment where mobility is everything, this is a profound handicap. The camera returns to the sand where the step was taken. The surface looks unchanged, smooth once more as currents erase the disturbance. Somewhere nearby, the stingray settles again, burying itself with a few slow flicks of its fins. The ecosystem resets instantly. The human body does not. One step in sand. One reflexive strike. A wound packed with debris that refuses to let go. The stingray does not hunt you. It does not seek you out. It simply reacts faster than you can think and leaves you to deal with the consequences long after it has vanished back into the seafloor. The house is quiet in a way the forest never is. Walls mute the wind. Floors hold heat. Corners collect dust and stillness. It feels controlled, insulated from the logic of the jungle outside. Yet the Brazilian wandering spider does not respect that boundary. It is not a web builder, not a patient architect of traps. It is a traveler, a ground hunter, a species shaped by motion and encounter. When it enters human spaces, it does not do so deliberately. It follows warmth, shelter, and the accidental corridors created by walls, boots, folded clothes, stacked boxes. The horror is not the spider itself. It is the realization that the rules of the forest have quietly crossed the threshold and are now waiting where you least expect them. The camera moves through a dim interior at ground level, tracking the base of a wall where dust gathers and air barely circulates. A boot rests there, toe pointed slightly upward, dark and hollow. In the wild, this shape would resemble a burrow mouth or a fallen palm sheath, a cool refuge from the heat of day. To the wandering spider, It is exactly that. Unlike spiders that anchor themselves to a single location, Phoneutria species patrol wide territories at night, actively searching for prey. They rely on speed, excellent vision, and an aggressive posture to survive. When dawn comes, they must find shelter quickly. Human environments offer hundreds of false refuges, each one a potential compression trap. The encounter is triggered not by provocation, but by routine. A foot slides into a boot. A hand scoops a pile of clothes from the floor. A knee presses into a corner while cleaning. The spider, pressed suddenly against an immovable surface, does not flee. Wandering spiders are known for their threat displays, rearing up, lifting their front legs, exposing their fangs. This posture is not bluff. It is a final warning before action. When there is no escape route, the bite follows. The puncture itself is sharp but brief, often masked by surprise rather than pain. What comes next feels wrong in a deeper way. Within minutes, the body begins to behave as if it has lost its internal thermostat. Heat surges outward from the core. Sweat pours without relief. Muscles tremble, not from fear, but from uncontrolled activation. The sensation is often described as overheating, yet body temperature may not rise dramatically. Instead, the nervous system is firing as if it must respond to an emergency that never resolves. This is the signature of Phoneutria venom. It is not a localized toxin designed to destroy tissue at the bite site. It is a systemic disruptor. The venom contains a suite of neurotoxins that interfere with ion channels throughout the nervous system, particularly those involved in pain transmission and muscle contraction. Signals that should be brief become sustained. Reflexes that should shut off remain engaged. The result is a full-body surge, a state of involuntary readiness with no outlet. The trembling intensifies as muscle fibers contract and relax erratically. Fine motor control deteriorates. Hands shake. Legs feel unstable. The jaw may clench. In some cases, waves of pain roll through the limbs and torso, not radiating from the bite, but appearing almost independently of it. This decoupling is what makes the experience so unsettling. The injury is small. The reaction is everywhere. In ecological terms, this makes sense. Wandering spiders prey on animals that rely on speed and coordination: insects, small vertebrates, even other spiders. A venom that simply numbs or paralyzes a single muscle group would be insufficient. Instead, Phoneutria venom overwhelms the prey's nervous system, collapsing coordination entirely. For humans, whose bodies are vastly larger, the same mechanism manifests as systemic distress rather than immediate incapacitation. The spider's own behavior reflects this necessity. Phoneutria species are exposed hunters. They do not hide behind silk barriers. They move through leaf litter, across open ground, up tree trunks. This lifestyle demands a venom that ends encounters quickly. When threatened, wandering spiders do not hesitate. They cannot afford prolonged struggle. The bite is decisive, the venom injected in a quantity that ensures the message is delivered clearly. The spread in this case is not mechanical, as with spines or thrashing bites. It is physiological. Once in the bloodstream, the venom's effects are distributed rapidly, affecting organs and systems far removed from the bite site. Heart rate may spike. Blood pressure can fluctuate. In some cases, nausea, dizziness, or visual disturbances appear as the autonomic nervous system is pulled into the storm. The body feels hijacked, as if every internal process has been set to maximum without coordination. Heat plays a critical role here. In warm environments, circulation increases, accelerating venom distribution. Sweating, meant to cool the body, becomes relentless and ineffective. Dehydration worsens muscle symptoms as electrolytes are depleted. This is why wandering spider bites often feel worse in tropical climates or poorly ventilated interiors. The environment feeds the venom's effects, stretching them out rather than allowing quick resolution. The spider itself, meanwhile, has already moved on, or has been killed in the immediate aftermath. Its role in the event is brief. The consequences linger. Symptoms can persist for hours, sometimes longer, gradually receding as the nervous system regains balance. In severe cases, medical intervention is required, not because the bite is tearing tissue apart, but because the body's systems are locked in a state of overdrive they cannot escape on their own. From an evolutionary standpoint, this venom is overqualified for human encounters, and that is precisely why it is effective. Phonutria did not evolve alongside humans. It evolved in a world where hesitation meant death. Its venom is not meant to warn gently. It is meant to end uncertainty. For predators, that lesson is remembered. Animals that survive a bite avoid the spider's hunting grounds, altering their movement patterns and reducing future conflict. The spider's territory becomes psychologically defended long after it has moved on. Human homes unintentionally replicate this logic. Corners, piles, containers all become temporary territories that wandering spiders exploit during their nightly movements. The horror is not that the spider seeks us out, but that our structures are biologically legible to it. We build shelter. The spider reads opportunity. The encounter is an accident of overlapping needs. As the chapter closes, the camera lingers on a quiet corner once more. The boot is empty now, turned upside down. The floor is still. The house feels reclaimed. Yet the lesson remains. With the Brazilian wandering spider, danger does not announce itself with webs or warning colors. It arrives through proximity and routine. The bite is small, the suffering grows large, and the spread is not something you can point to on the skin. It is something that moves through the entire body, reminding you that even indoors the logic of the forest still applies.